I like the PlayStation. Do you like a PlayStation?
My dad's been watching Scottish sitcom Still Game every day for as long as I can remember. So let's make him a present. And if you're thinking, Lex, I'm not Scottish, I've never heard of this show, well, stick around and learn a bit of culture, for goodness sake. Well, that and the techniques that I use will work for a variety of projects too. I'm making the most iconic set from the show, the local pub, The Clansman, with a couple little details from specific episodes. I grabbed a reference still from one of the early episodes to use. As it was a long-running show with a long hiatus too, the set evolved over the years, and there's definite differences you can spot between seasons. Now, if you've watched my channel before, you know that I take scale, accuracy and precise realism very, very seriously. So, about that big, probably? Alright. To me, it's actually more important to keep it simple because A, as I said, there's no definitive version of the pub, and B, I filmed this like 2 weeks before Christmas and did not have the time to be messing about. Plus, as I always say, scale is only a suggestion. With some sheets of foam core cut out, I started roughly sketching the design. I'm not making the whole building. I don't think we really ever see any other angles of it in the show, so I chose to cut out the section of the wall around the front as a standalone piece. And with that sketched out with as much artistic skill as that one fresco that made Jesus look like you'd just told him you're back with your ex,
bombastic side eye,
it was time to add details. After struggling with the tacky glue that I forgot to store upside down, I used some thin EVA foam for the foundations and Crafter favourite coffee stirrer sticks for the door and window frames. And now that you've come to an agreement with the tacky glue, you can easily add some corrugated paper for the metal door shutters. I sealed it with Mod Podge, which I made red because I knew the red parts would take a few coats and everything else was going to be covered anyway. And then it was time to add the brick for the top half. Rather than cut new bricks, I looked in my pile of extra foam from previous projects and found these. And I thought, well, they are bigger than the real ones would be, but it's supposed to be a bit stylized and I think it'll be okay. And can I just say, what the absolute was I thinking? They were way too big, so I ripped them off and just made new bricks in a better size like I should have just done in the first place. And with a bag of wasted time and some brown Mod Podge, I was ready to grout them. For those unaware of Still Game, it's a Scottish sitcom about two pensioners, Jack and Victor, and how they and their friends deal with getting older. It's beloved by basically every single person in Scotland, except maybe my mum, who used to love it, but now that my dad found it on Netflix, is basically being Clockwork Oranged by highbrow Glasgow patter like,
"Back off, ya spooky bitch!"
Back to the diorama, I used some plaster to cover the lower section, ready for Satan's favourite rough cast outdoor wall coating technique, Pebble Dash. Sorry to all the Pebble Dash stands out there, but it's awful. There's nothing worse when you're a kid than accidentally scraping your arm off one of these bad boys and looking like Wolverine's had a go on you. But with a sprinkling of mixed sand and ballast, we got it looking still f***ing ugly. I gave the bricks a dry brush and wash to bring out the texture and add highlights and shadows before moving on to the windows. Usually I would inset the windows more properly, but I was starting to run short on time here, so I just made some I could stick to the front. And spoilers, you can hardly tell when it's all done. Off camera, I made these out of some more thin EVA foam, and the glass is just one of those cheap, thin plastic chopping boards that fling your veg across the room and provide no actual function, apart from making good, slightly cloudy windows. I painted some loosely woven fabric white to look like the net curtains in the windows, and they were ready to glue down. I wanted to match the paint colour from the show as closely as I could, but because my colour theory absolutely sucks, I just used a tube of artist's acrylic that was the same shade. I had to add some matte medium, which is why it doesn't look great here, but after a second coat it was all good. The reason I wanted the colour to be so exact was because, with some Photoshop trickery, I managed to remake the sign and printed it out on some matte faux paper. I stuck it onto some matte board with Mod Podge and painted the edges black. Next, I made the chalkboard sign, which I thought was a great opportunity to add in a few references to specific episodes like
the Story Maduri.
Fun fact, I don't drink, and yes, I know, disappointment to Scotland, well, okay, I get it. But when I did, my favourite drink was Maduri, because it doesn't taste alcoholic, and alcohol tastes gross, it turns out. But people would shout Sturi Maduri at me every time I asked for one. And of course I had to add this reference, as nearly every episode they say,
2 pints, prick.
I stuck those down with more tacky glue and got to work mounting it on the base. I used toothpicks for stability and a metric ton of glue. Off camera, I whipped up these steps with foam, wire and wood filler. I tried to make them look a bit weathered and messy, as I don't think this place has had too many upgrades over the years. I made this wooden frame for a ramp out of more mat board. I mixed up some filler and coloured it grey to be the concrete inside, and used my palette knife and various sculpting tools to shape it as it dried. This is another reference to a particular episode where Jack and Victor decide to make a ramp to help one of their friends, and this happens.
I thought the whole thing was going to fall flat in its face.
So their ramp gets messed up. But at the very end of the episode, you see that it's more than just messed up.
Thanks for that, boys. I needed that.
If I'd had more time, I would have used clay and sculpted this, but I thought the filler would be faster. I did have to keep trying as it dried to find a stage where it would keep its shape but still look right. Eventually I realised it would be easier to make handprints with, well, a hand. This one is a spare from my Warhammer Sylvaneth army because, yes, I'm one of those, and I pressed it into the filler in various places. And you might now be thinking, Lex, that face and hands look massive, way out of proportion to the door. Is that an artistic choice? And to that I say, I told you about the scale being a f***ing suggestion, don't you listen? I mean, yes, artistic. That, or it was about 3 AM when I did this and I just didn't realise I was doing it wrong till it was too late. For the bottom windows, they mostly just look a little bit dark inside. So a trick I sometimes like to do is to paint the inside of the windows black and then use UV resin that I've tinted orange with a tiny bit of white to give a slight opaqueness, which makes it look dark but with a slightly warm glow so it doesn't look so flat. I made up more grey filler to cover the ground, which I tried to make kind of flat but not completely, so that it would look more realistic to these kinds of roads, which are specially designed to be just wonky enough that you think you're on Mars after one too many inside the pub. The only thing more satisfying than pretending I'm a fancy oil painter and spreading the filler with a palette knife is watching this black wash soak into it. I made sure to put a little bit extra wash in the corners that would be the dirtiest. I sprinkled a few different flocks on the base. Some were finer dirt flocks, some dried herbs that I used for small crunched up leaves, and a few of these larger leaves too, focusing on the corners and edges where things would more naturally build up. I sealed them in with watered down Mod Podge and we were ready for the beauty shots. As always, thank you so much for watching. I know this one was a little bit more of a niche project, but I hope that if you managed to stay this long, there was something you could take away from it. I really appreciate the support, and of course any likes and subscribes and comments and Patreons. They just absolutely make my day, and so I'll see you in the next one.